With that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Bill Payne. Bill is an executive engineer, is an executive and an engineer and investor who works for the Frontier Angel Fund. Over the past 30 years, Bill has successfully founded and invested in more than 50 startup companies, and that's why he's here today. So with that, if Bill Payne would come up, please.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for being here, Bill.
My pleasure.
Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
having me.
You bet.
Good morning. I'm an engineer and a recovering entrepreneur and an angel investor. I've invested in 52 companies, several in Montana, and I've written about 100 checks to those 52 companies because the first check is almost never enough. This is one of the most beautiful pictures that I've ever seen. It's the Great Northern Mountain that's just a bit east of here. And I know most of the locals think that the Great Northern is a bar in Whitefish. In fact, this Great Northern was there first. Here's what I'm going to talk to you about, and I'm going to talk to you about that pretty quickly. And I hope we have some time for questions at the end. And I'm not going to read these slides, so if you have any interest in them, you might do so. If not, that's fine too. I'd like to start presentations like this about talking about the entrepreneur-friendly communities, because there's an awful lot of emphasis everywhere I go on the capital food chain. And capital is only one of the ingredients that's necessary to build an entrepreneur-friendly community. And I think I've outlined on this slide what the complete community might look like. And we in Northwest Montana have our strengths and weaknesses on that chart, but we surely have most of those components in place. Not all of them, but most of them. I'm going to spend most of my time today talking about that little circle that's got angels in it, and I'm going to explain who they are and what they do. Hopefully you'll have a better understanding of angel investment when I'm finished. I do want to agree with Tom that capital is available for startup entrepreneurs in Montana. It's not easy for entrepreneurs anywhere in the world to find capital. I just returned from 5 months in New Zealand, sharing my experiences with the Kiwis. I had a delightful time. And I heard the senator and Tom say some things that I heard the Kiwis saying. Things like 1.5 degrees of separation from any other Kiwi in the world. And there are 1 million or more Kiwis who don't live in New Zealand. And very easy access to a variety of Kiwis of great experience within their country. And I also heard that they bemoan the fact that venture capital, they are not a flyover country, they're a fly-around country. But from a venture capital's perspective, we are a flyover state. But you know, we're not alone. There are only 25 or 30 other flyover states. So there's really only 2 communities for capital in the world, Silicon Valley and every place else. New Zealand, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, Oklahoma, it's all the same as far as venture capital is concerned. It's a plane ride, and they do go there when there's a very compelling story to go there, but most of the time they'd rather get in their Mercedes and drive down the road and visit a local company. So I did want to talk to you a bit about this because I want to show you where the sources of capital that you're going to hear from mostly today fit into this picture. This is the sort of capital life cycle of new ventures with sort of pre-seed proof of concept on the left and sort of totally mature companies on the right. I think where Tom is spending most of his time is sort of maybe not at the extreme right, but most of the way to the right-hand side. We angel investors are sort of in the middle, and government sources that you're going to hear a lot about today are ahead of us, earlier than we are, right where friends and family are. The valley of death is an important thing for you to understand when it's talking about angel investing. That is the earning power of the company or the cash generation capability of the company. And that, when you're starting a company, goes straight down because all you do is spend. You've got no earning power for that company or cash generation coming into that company. And the very point that that curve starts to break, and a little bit of a turn in that, is when you begin to have some revenues in the company. And that's about the time angel investors, the earliest time that angel investors will get involved. Why might that be? Every entrepreneur that I've ever met has a killer application. Unfortunately, their customers don't all agree with them, and I have to talk to customers before I'd be interested in making an investment. So it's that interface, when you as entrepreneurs have found customers, is the earliest that we angels will tend to engage. And so we will invest in pre-revenue companies as long as you've identified some customers we can talk to. And venture capital, if you can find it, will generally engage much, much later, at a point when the company probably has substantial revenues and probably has some positive earnings. We angel investors tend to invest $250,000 to $1 million in seed and startup companies. Now, I also want to point out to you a very, very important source of capital to American entrepreneurs. And that, surprisingly enough, is the data on the left, friends and family. Every year in this country, about $60 billion, with a B, dollars is invested by friends and family members in startup companies, in entrepreneurs and startup companies. Aunt Martha's writing a check to nephew Jason for $10,000 or $20,000 to get the company started. And Aunt Martha doesn't understand business or a company. She's investing in a nephew, in a person. And that total summed capital annually is 3 times as much as venture capital invests per year in this country. So the biggest source of capital by far in the U.S. for startup ventures is friends and family members, not angels, not venture capital, and not government. So you're probably going to see this mountain picture several times. I actually have to credit my fellow Frontier Angel Fund member, Jerry Mislik, who took this picture from near his house on Big Mountain. I love that picture, so it'll be coming back. Maybe it'll make you thirsty for lunch. I think this is why we angel investors do what we do. At least it's one of the reasons. We're investing time and money in companies. We get a return on investment for our money, but not necessarily for our time. And this chart was created by the Kauffman Foundation and published in December of '09 at the Obama Jobs Summit. And it shows in the blue bars that companies that are less than 5 years old create about 3 million jobs per year, plus or minus. If you look at companies that are over 5 years old, you'll note that, geez, they're not creating very many jobs. And you notice during recessions, which are the gray areas, the blue lines continue to be about $3 million a year, but the red lines go real negative, because the bigger companies, the companies that are over 5 years old, are laying off people. This is the quote from one of the authors of that study, a really smart guy by the name of Bob Lighton. He showed 2 conclusions. The first was that in the last 30 years, companies less than 5 years old have created 40 million jobs in the U.S. And more importantly, companies that are 5 years old and older have negative job production in the sum. So that means when Microsoft hires 15,000 people, Chrysler lays off 18,000 people. That's what's been going on in this country for the last 30 years with respect to job creation. That's why what we do as entrepreneurs and their sources of capital are critical to the United States of America. So I can't claim to you that angel investors who fund those very kinds of companies are responsible for any of that or all of that. I suspect those are the exact kind of companies that we're looking to fund, high growth companies, and we are funding them at the point where they have 1 or 2 employees. So I think we're making a positive contribution, but we haven't got that data to talk to you about. So let me tell you a little bit about who we angel investors are. We tend to be wealthy, retired business persons or exited entrepreneurs who are investing time and money in startup ventures. Actually, I used the term exited entrepreneurs. Tom and I are exited entrepreneurs. And I actually used that expression in a blog one time, and I got this really nice email back that said, "Excuse me, sir, but you misspelled excited." And I said, yes, I can guarantee you that exited entrepreneurs are indeed excited, but I meant to write exited. We angel investors are investing our mad money. That's roll the dice, go to Vegas, 2 to 10% of our net worth that we don't need to maintain our lifestyle for the rest of our days. So it is high risk money. It's money that by definition of what an accredited investor is, we can afford to lose. It is so high risk that to be successful, we have to have a very diversified portfolio. We usually recommend that angel investors have 10 or 12 of these startup companies in their portfolio, not 1 or 2. If we make 1 or 2, we're sort of doomed to failure because half of the companies go out of business. 1 in 10 provides us with all our return on investment. So this is high risk investing. We tend to get engaged with these companies as mentors, as directors, and you might say, well, how can you possibly claim to be a part-time investor or claim to enjoy you being sort of retired if you're engaged with a dozen companies? Well, we're not. There are 10 or 12 or 15 of us that invest in every company, so we're personally only engaged in, maybe a quarter of those companies as mentors and directors, and our fellow angels who are investing alongside of us are engaged with the rest. We try to get the person that can help our portfolio companies the most to be very engaged with those companies. This is a brand new publication, actually came out about 3 months ago out of Harvard Business School from Josh Lerner, who's arguably the smartest guy in academia on angel investing and venture capital. And Josh studied a whole bunch of angel deals and came to the conclusion that the time we invest in companies is even more valuable than the money. Now, that was very rewarding for me to see somebody actually come out who had some academic credentials and tell me that the time that I spend with my portfolio companies is more valuable than my money. I sort of hoped that was the case, but and I've actually probably told people that could be the case, but I've never actually been able to read somebody. Incidentally, I put the title of his paper up there just so you could see it. Not that I could even pronounce the words, but it's there just in case you're so interested. We angel investors invest our money for return on investment and our time for altruistic reasons. We like helping our communities grow. We feel the need to give back to entrepreneurs or we want to just continue to use our skills that we've developed over the last 30 or 40 years to help entrepreneurs grow new businesses. And so our return on invested time is not included in our ROI metric. These are some companies that you may have heard of that have been funded by angel investors. And now let me spend a little bit of time talking about how we evaluate deals, because I think that actually may be a bit of a surprise to you. The simplest way to put this is that we bet on the jockey, not on the horse. Technology and product are way down the list in importance. We invest in businesses. We don't invest in products and technology. So we're looking for experienced people who understand a business vertical, the business segment, have some experience in leading teams, and building teams, and we're looking for ventures that will scale big time. This is very high risk investing. 1 in 10 gives us all of our ROI. That means it's got to be a 20x. So if only 1 in 10 is going to give us all of our ROI, you might say, well, why aren't you investing in the other 9? Well, if we were smarter, we wouldn't be, but we aren't. So we're investing in 10 and getting return on investment out of 10 or 15% of our investments. And if that's going to happen and you're going to have a positive ROI, you've got to have a 15x, 20x or more on your money. So we're only investing in companies that scale. So those are the first 2 things we look at when we're looking at companies, is the management team and the scalability of the opportunity. There are other important ingredients, and I'm going to go into that a little bit more. So what's important in a management team? Well, I have 2 things I want to talk to you about, and the first is integrity. No such thing as a little white lie when you're evaluating an investment opportunity as an angel investor. You attended a certain school, but you actually didn't graduate, but it says you graduated on your resume. Bye-bye. I'm going to go to the next deal immediately. Why? Because I can't ever believe anything you write that you send to me in the future. Milestones, financials, there's nothing. I need integrity. The second thing I need is coachability. Why is coachability important? Well, it's not necessarily important to be a successful entrepreneur, to be a coachable entrepreneur. But if I'm going to invest a lot of my time in your venture and you really don't want that advice, you're just pretending that you're listening, and it's clear over time that that's not really something you're interested in, is my advice or the advice of anybody else that's in your environment, then I think I'll just go invest in another company somewhere where the entrepreneur would value the advice of somebody who has been there and done that before. Those are the 2 key ingredients for me in the management team. I told you scalability. We're looking for companies that'll do $15, $20, $30 million in 5 to 8 years. That's a lot of revenue growth, but that's the kind of scalability that we need to make the kinds of investments we do. There are other issues on there that are pretty important to us. Let me just give you an example of gross margins. High gross margins are pretty important to us because we don't want to go out and raise more capital every time the company needs to expand. We want to get to the company to positive cash flow and let the company organically grow after that. Our $1 million goes a much longer in building a company if the company has high gross margins and can grow on internally generated cash once it achieves positive cash flow. Some of the other issues that are important to us, I already told you about the prototype issue. In other words, the company has to be in a position to have already shown the product to customers so that we can talk to those customers. So it has to at least have a prototype. May already have revenues, but that's the earliest that we would engage with a company. And what we're looking for those customers to tell us is that your product is a painkiller, not a vitamin pill. It's something that they absolutely must have, not nice to have. We want to make sure the dogs will eat the dog food. If I can use an analogy where the customer is the dog. We want to make sure that they must buy that product, and that's when we become interested in funding your company. I want to talk a little bit about intellectual property because we tend to hear a lot about commercializing technology out of universities and national laboratories. And let me tell you that technology and competitive advantage and intellectual property are a threshold that develops a threshold of interest by us if you don't have a competitive advantage. And that could be a 5-year head start or some trade secrets. It doesn't have to be patents. But if you don't have some competitive advantage, then it's really hard for us to make an investment in your company. Why would that be? Well, if you think about it, we are going to invest $500,000 in your company. There are a lot of other people out there that are in the software business, if you're a software company, who've got much deeper pockets than we do. When your great idea gets out there, unless you've got a huge head start or a tremendous competitive advantage in some other format, they're just going to reach into that pocket and duplicate what you've done with our money, and run us off the store shelves. So we need that competitive advantage. So there has to be some level of intellectual property protection, but we're not going to pay a lot of money for that. Why? Because we can't defend it. We don't have deep enough pockets if some big venture comes along and decides to cross that territory and begin to impede upon your patented area. We don't have deep enough pockets to protect ourselves from a Fortune 1000 company. The value of intellectual property is it gives you a competitive advantage when you're starting the company and has a lot of value at exit, because big corporates, when they buy your company at exit through a mergers and acquisitions transaction, will put a lot of value on the fact that you have etched out a corner of the universe that you can protect with your patents. And they're more than willing to go to the wall to protect that patent moving forward. A few other points that we're looking for, and I'm not going to spend too much time on those today, but these are all part of what we would call due diligence. We would all look at all of the issues that I've addressed before you today before we make an investment. And just remember, we're looking for highly scalable ventures where we have a possibility of making 10, 15, 20 times our money or more, because that's the only way that we're going to make money in these transactions. I do want to point out that we're probably going to want to help you build a professional board with outside non-investor, non-entrepreneur expertise, plus some representation by investors and some representation by the entrepreneurs. And that last bullet on there is a nasty one. Talk about animosity. Here we want to fund in your company, and the first thing we're talking about is the possibility of replacing the CEO. Well, let me tell you that all entrepreneurs wear two hats when they start their company: an employee ego hat and a shareholder hat. And those hats are never in conflict until they get their first investor, and then they're always in conflict, because your ego employee hat will be in conflict with your investor hat, because there's another investor out there pointing to you new directions the company might go. It's always in the entrepreneur's best interest to make sure the best possible person is running that venture, because your future net worth is tied up 100% usually in that startup venture. So oftentimes, in fact, most of the time, you are the best CEO to be in that job. But when it comes a time that the company can grow faster than you're capable of managing its growth, it's time for you as entrepreneurs and your advisors to go out and find the best, most experienced entrepreneur or CEO, hired gun in the world to help run your company. So there are 3 active angel groups in Montana at the moment, and more on the way. And I think they're listed here. You're going to hear from Liz Markey a bit later in the day. I don't know if Gary Bloomer or anybody from Tech Ranch is here. If they are, look them up. You can learn a little bit more about the Bridger Group. And the Big Sky Angels are represented by Dave Obutz here today. Is David in the room? Don't see him. You can look up that website and learn more about those angel investors. Anyway, thank you very much. I've enjoyed very much the interaction with you. Thank you, Senator.
Great job. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, Bill. I very much appreciate the presentation as well as Tom's. I thank you very much.